Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about the penetration testing process, but from an extremely high level. And the whole purpose of this video is really to help you understand the process. So if you have a need for a pen test of some sort, then you'll know what to expect or what should to expect. Now we are going to discuss some legal aspects of a variety of different areas of the penetration testing process, um, not only from the pen tester side, but also from the client side. So obviously, first thing, there's going to be a client with a need of some sort to have a penetration test done. The very first step in this process should be a mutual non-disclosure signed between all the parties. And in Arrakis, we suggest that the person who signs for the client be the chief legal officer or the attorney or things like that, simply from the standpoint of potentially being able to claim attorney-client privilege and protect the document or the confidentiality of the document more. It does help delay any sort of disclosure if there's legal reasons to do so. Then obviously we're going to have to scope the environment to figure out what the level of effort's going to be, what it's going to cost, things like that. And the scoping is generally going to be around how many IP addresses there are, how many users, if we're going to do web application pen testing, how many lines of code, how many different types of profiles in the application, things like that. And that'll be a part of the scoping process. And of course, the mutual non-disclosure is a big part of allowing that discussion to occur. However, there could also be other types of penetration tests or conversations around that, like is it going to be an internal pen test to see what a bad actor or an accidental bad actor could do on the inside from the employee standpoint. It could be an external pen test, which is where we check all the basically anything that's on the internet that represents the company. And there are some caveats to that too. It could also be a physical pen test, which is essentially figuring out how to break into a building or talk your way in or anything like that. So I'm going to kind of do a little sidebar for a second, but in an ideal world for any pen test that gets done, internal, external, including physical, web app, anything like that, we recommend social engineering also be applied. It's simply because the human being is always going to be the strongest link in cybersecurity, but also the weakest link. So we always recommend that. And it's also important to understand that even though we have a mutual non-disclosure, we've scoped it out, and maybe we have a contract, things like that. I've already mentioned that the signer for the contract should be the chief legal officer or an attorney of some sort. But on the side of the company that's doing the penetration testing, we also need to make sure that they have what I call a permission slip that clearly outlines, and generally this is separate from the contract. So the contract would say, you're going to do a pen test and we're going to pay this much and you're going to do that. How we run things is we have a permission slip that details exactly what gets done, which IP ranges, the start, the end dates, things like that. And the reason why is, well, because performing a pen test is illegal without permission. If I was to do a physical pen test against a building and not have permission to do so, that would be called breaking and entering. If I was to do an external pen test or an internal pen test without a contract or a permission slip indicating it's allowed, then that's a felony, and we don't want to ever go into that space of being charged with a crime. So that means, from the contractual standpoint, that the contract has to be rock solid, has to be clear. The pen testers have to understand it. The client has to understand it. We want to make sure that we have the right signers on both sides, because an inappropriately worded contract could lead to trouble. I believe there's a case in Oklahoma where a city or a state government hired a penetration testing team. They were successful, but they also got caught, and they spent some days in jail by the people who hired them to do the work. So you have to make sure that you're not going to get caught. So we have a contract scoping, non-disclosure, permission slip, things like that. So we have the IP ranges and all that good stuff. So once we have the penetration testing aspects and all the technical things that came out of doing the penetration test itself, then we're going to have to create a report. Now, if you want to see more details on penetration testing, then Arrakis does have a penetration testing video that's more in depth than this. And there's also separate videos like how to crack passwords and so on. And you can watch those at your own time. Anyways, after we're done with all this work, the pen tester team is going to create a report. So we're going to call that a draft report. And the draft report should be, obviously created and reviewed by the pen test team, but then it should be peer reviewed by a person within the company that is not the client and is not a pen test member. You want to get a trusted advisor to look at the report to make sure it makes sense. Once that's done, we really like to suggest that the draft report is sent to the client signer. So again, the chief legal officer for their review, so they can ensure you don't want to catch them off guard. Nobody likes surprises when it comes to penetration testing or practically anything with cybersecurity. So nobody likes surprises. Give them a chance to see it, absorb it, and so on, so that there are no surprises. I would also suggest that once you give them the draft, you give them a time-bound period, like 7 days. Like, here's the draft. You have 7 days to make comments. At the end of 7 days, the draft will be the final copy. Once the final copy is created, then we always do a outbrief, a PowerPoint slide deck with the high points of the pen test. We provide the PowerPoint briefing, as well as the penetration test report itself. We always do this by DocuSign. We always send these by DocuSign because we want to ensure that we have some sort of auditable trail showing that the client received the report, the final report, not the draft, the final report, and we want to be able to audit that. Now, once it's provided again to the chief legal officer or the attorney for the client, if they then choose to disperse it amongst themselves, that's on them. I would assume an attorney would understand the aspects of dispersing very sensitive documents, so it's pretty much on them. Obviously, if when you submit the draft to them, if there's changes that they want to make, go ahead and be receptive to the changes, provided that it does not change the essence of the report. So we can't hide information, we can't delete information, but sometimes company culture is such that we need to massage the information a little bit better so it's easier to be absorbed. But we cannot change the essence of a report. So if, for example, if 10 passwords were compromised, we don't want to say a couple passwords were compromised or a few passwords were compromised. We really want to say 10 passwords were compromised. But there might be a different way that works to the client company that is just better for them, in absorbing that. All right. And then while reports can be written in a variety of ways, obviously, a pen tester always wants to write a report in such a way that if needed, the penetration tester can testify to the report in court or under oath. Or the pen test report can be used as legitimate audit evidence. We don't want to write things in the pen test report that could be perceived as possible kickbacks or anything that would be skewed or anything along those lines. We want to be able to provide the information to the client in such a way that it's very, very straightforward, very easy to read and understand. Now, one last thing before we go. The way Arrakis writes our pen test reports, we basically do it in 3 sections. We have the executive section for the executives that are too busy to read. Lots of colors, lots of graphs, things like that, explaining what they need to know. Generally, the executive report is only 1 or 2 pages. Then we have the senior manager report, which is or high level manager report, which is much more than 1 or 2 pages, more detail, but doesn't really get down in the weeds on how technically how to do things or provide screenshots or whatever. And then we have the down in the weeds section of the report, which is fleshing out the previous section, providing screenshots, uh, providing examples of what should be done. So, if, for example, if there was passwords were detected that had a low level of complexity, then in the very technical portion of the report, we would say, per NIST 853 or per CMMC version 2 or 800-171 or PCI, whatever, passwords should be blah, 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 blah. And we would spell that out for them so it's easy to understand. And with that, I thank everyone for your time today, and I will see you next time. See ya.